Hey YouTube, what's up? Coming at you with another kind of tool philosophy video. Um, this time around, kind of want to get into my tool acquisition philosophy. I know I'm kind of getting to the point a little bit earlier. I'm going to try and make this a little bit less ranty and rambly, but we'll see how that goes. Um, I think it's really interesting to watch how people's boxes and setups develop. There's something really interesting and narrative about the whole process because, as far as I'm aware, very few of us, our first day on the job, go out, drop 5 or 6 grand on a set of tools in a box, and go from there and work out of that same box for the rest of our careers. That's just not how this works. One, very few of us have that kind of money to drop right away into. Most of the time, what we do changes. Our jobs change. The kind of equipment that we work on changes. The equipment itself changes over time. Our preferences change. Our philosophies change. And it's also something that just sort of happens and is accrued over the course of a lifetime. So I think there's absolutely a story that can kind of be said about how these kits develop. And I think to kind of understand where my toolbox is, we have to understand where it came from. And that can kind of help make decisions on where we want to go from there. So, starting out, the first couple of shops that I'd worked in had shop tools. Everything was provided. It was a super convenient situation for somebody that was moving around the country every 6 months, just kind of working seasonally. And so I didn't have a ton. I had what I generally needed to support my hobbies and to be able to support some of my side projects and just really to feel confident in my ability to handle situations. Because for me, tools, they're not toys, they're latent capacity. They are what allow us to make the changes that we want to see in our environment around us. To be able to fix things, to be able to build things, to be able to maintain things. It's how we interact, especially with machinery. There's a lot of tooling that kind of goes into that because, unlike carpentry, where you'll know a master carpenter by how few tools he carries on his belt, and an apprentice by how much he brings to the job site, to an extent. It's a very different medium. I do a lot of building and construction and everything else for my job, and I happen to do it in pretty remote environments and deal with a lot of constraints from that. So, on the one hand, I have a lot of time and experience invested into developing skills as a capacity to be able to make creative solutions and work around problems. Um, my God, there's there's 100 different ways to use a circ saw, regardless of what OSHA might have to say about it. But it's really a different medium when it comes to machines because you can use a lot more skill to overcome a lack of tooling in something with a soft medium like wood, dealing with construction, things like that. There's a lot of ways that you can kind of backtrack and fix things. There's some of that in the mechanic world, but a lot more of it is tool dependent. And so for me, when I'm thinking about acquiring new tools, I do it more so in the idea of what can I not currently do with my setup? And what would I like to be able to do? How do I increase my work capacity through my tooling? And how do I do that efficiently? When I first got started out, all I had was a Husky 270 piece kit that I've actually got still sitting in the back of my truck. That's what turned in to my truck kit. But starting out, that's all I had. Then from there, when I started working at a shop that required me to provide my own tools, I was kind of in a panic trying to get things figured out for what I'm gonna need for everything. They had an old shop box that they were able to kind of let me work out of while I was building stuff up. But the next couple of things I got were actually these dirt cheap Fisherman Amazon socket sets. I got the 1/4 inch master and the 3/8 service set. I think I spent like less than $50 between both of the sets on there. And that was something that I felt that I needed to do because I needed to start, one, working with impacts more, but two, I had gaps in that first box. I had a lot of skips and a lot of things that I was just missing. And at the time, I was pretty much just working on Steel and Simplicity, all the smaller stuff. Well, from there, I quickly started getting into more of the Kubota and everything else, Kubota and Bobcat. And some of the aspects of the Simplicity just needed bigger sockets. And so the next thing I did was grab these Fisherman 1/2 inch sockets. And these ones were kind of a fun project because they had a big master set. It was well over $100, even for the cheap ones. And I wanted to try and keep things lean but get as much as I could. So what I ended up doing was actually buying the shorts and deeps separately for standard and metric, because I could actually get these ones in a chrome moly instead of chrome vanadium, which was important to me, and I could get more capacity out of it. The more sockets I had, the more the more sizes I had, the more I could do. And so then I started going with that. Well, I got through there, and I still ultimately used a lot of chromes. And that's where I started to get into needing a lot more bits and Allens and things like that. So I started out, first Quinn Master socket I got was the Master Bit socket set. Loved it. From there, I really couldn't tell you. I think I did kind of ball out on the rest of the chromes when I finally got around to it. It was some kind of a 40% off sale at Harbor Freight, and that's when I went for the 1/4s, the 3/8s, and the halves. And the thing was, all these fancy Ernst socket rails that you see didn't come until a lot later. So there was several months as I was filling things up and going from there that I actually had this box kind of full. It was horrendously inefficiently packed, but drawers were full. So that's when I had started slowly acquiring the rails, because they're not the cheapest thing in the world, but they are the best ones that I've found for my purposes. And I started getting things on rails. That 1/2 inch box, or the 1/2 inch master set, half of the box, so the top half and the bottom half, were each a drawer. So 2 of my drawers were just 1/2 inch chrome sockets because of the blow molded cases that they were in. So when I got those on rails, it really opened things up for me. Similarly, I had the 1/4 inch set just inside the blow molded case. I kept it on top of this toolbox. I'll get into this one eventually. This was actually the first toolbox I started with, because as a small engine technician, I prefer to work from a bench, and I like being able to grab and go from that workbench. So I like pegboard, I like having a workbench toolbox to kind of work out of. And so I had my 1/4 inch set on top of that. The 3/8 I actually had sitting on the side here for quite a while. And I was making do. It was suboptimal, so I kept wanting to continue to make things more efficient. But I had to do it piece by piece. My first wrench set that I actually had was this one here. I've now got it up here just as what's on hand and available. These are also Ernst grippers. To get the orange and the green, they came in 15s, and these are only sets of 13, so I just hacked the rest of them off. Remember, y'all, you can do that. If you own it, you can make it however you need it to be. But these were also about the cheapest thing I could get on Amazon at the time. These were the Jaeger tight spot ratcheting wrenches, the non-reversible ratchet wrenches. And I don't really have a complaint with them. I do think that the open end leaves a little bit to be desired. I've definitely felt them stretch. And it would be nice to have a little more option when it came to that. But that was the set of wrenches that I worked out of for over a year, and they got me through. But as time went on, I ended up investing a little bit more into my wrench setup. And I haven't really gotten into this drawer yet as far as explaining what's in it. And I think it's going to be a little bit different of a philosophy than a lot of people have. Some people might share it, but I don't know that this is the current typical way that this is going on. One, I had to make budgetary choices. I knew that for the value for everything else, an Icon set purchased on sale was going to be my best bang for the buck, as for what was predictable and plannable out to a certain point and just objectively. So I'm not sure the exact order. I know that I had gotten the actual wrenches first. I don't recall if I'd gotten the crow's feet at the same time or not, but I had to make a decision. I really like ratcheting wrenches. They're super convenient, they're super handy, and they can make you faster and more efficient at doing the work itself. And that's nothing to sneeze at. But my issue is that my background comes from, if you don't have it with you, you don't have it at all. And things happen. Tools break. That's just how it is. That's why all the good ones have some kind of a warranty on them. Tools break. So that, coupled with my aversion to skips and trying to have the most complete sets I can, led me to foregoing a ratcheting wrench on my upgrade, which might sound backwards to a lot of people, but I went with the Icon standard box end wrench with whatever they're calling it, that extra grip, that Flank Drive Plus style teeth on there. And I ended up getting the regular set and the large set for both the standard and metric, because I end up using both of those. And I also ended up getting the Icon 4-way angle wrenches. Now, this isn't my favorite set of 4-way wrenches. Ultimately, I will be expanding this out more with Tecton, but my thought process behind it was, it's a lot harder to break a chunk of steel than it is to break a ratcheting mechanism. And sometimes you just need a regular wrench. If I'm using my impact on something big, I've got 1 1/4 inch, and I have to, it's a through bolt, which might sound odd, but it's something that I actually do a lot of in my current job, because whenever you're out working on docks and big infrastructure like that, you're dealing with big fasteners. Well, if you had a ratcheting wrench for it, you don't exactly want to be putting that on the backside as you're hitting it with an impact. Now, yeah, you can use the open end, depending on how much torque you're dealing with. You could potentially have some rounding issues, but the bigger thing is, for me, I like to use the 12 point for holding those because it's a little more secure and I don't have to worry about dropping things. I know we're not all hanging off the edge of a dock and getting ready to drop something into 30 foot of water, but that's been an experience of mine, and that's something that I like to try and just sort of plan around. Do I think that's ever going to happen in a mechanics environment? No. But I still see the value, I see the utility in sometimes you just need a regular wrench. And with the cost-benefit analysis, what I could get, because my biggest issue with those Jaegers wasn't the ratcheting mechanism, it was the jaws on the open end. That I wanted something a little tougher, a little sturdier, something that could grip, deal with all of the rust and crap that we deal with up in the Rust Belt. And that's also kind of where, out of all of my specialty wrenches, why I have a set of crow's feet and four-ways and standards and no ratcheting flex heads right now. Well, it might take longer, but all of these can turn a bolt. Sometimes a crow's foot or a four-way are your only options. And this could, in some way, be a redundancy. It really could. But the way it kind of works for me is, one, these crow's feet carry sizes that these four-ways don't. But more importantly, I have a limited amount of torque that I can apply through a crow's foot without legitimately risking the structural integrity of the ratchet that I'm using. Now, when you got a lifetime warranty, it is what it is. You take it in or you get it rebuilt. Depends on who makes it, and that's whatever. But that's downtime. That's all of a sudden a capacity that you now lack because it broke. So I am looking to fill this space. I've done my research. I've taken a look. I'm looking at getting the Tecton double ratcheting flex head set because, again, they cover all of the sizes that you're not going to get in Icon, particularly standard. I also like the idea of those because they're a non-reversible. A lot of people hate it because they back themselves into things. I see that as a risk, but the other thing that I'm seeing is that's a tighter head. It doesn't have the extension for indent, or a recessed bolt, which might be useful in a lot of situations, but I have more ways to get around that. What I need is to be able to fit in somewhere tight or awkward. That's where the flex comes in, to be able to do things quickly. That's where the ratchet comes in. And ultimately, it'll fit in the space that I've got here. So one of these days, I will pick that set up. When that'll be? Who's to say? For me, when it comes to buying tools, I have a couple of different pathways that the purchase ends up getting made. The stuff that I can sit on, that I can live without, that I can plan ahead, I'm kind of a lazy cat fisherman. I just sort of find what I want, I do all my research, I figure out exactly what it is that I'm looking for. I'll add it to some kind of a cart, I'll put it on some kind of a wish list, and I just sit on it. I sit and wait and wait and wait until the right combination of sales, availability, need, financial ability, all kind of comes together and it just makes sense. Sometimes that can happen quickly. Sometimes it'll be years. And the thing is, if you're not so much motivated on getting that next fix, getting that next tool, having that new shiny object, that instant gratification, and all you're really looking for is an increase in capacity, or especially if it's just something that would be nice and not a need, that's fine. You can sit and wait. It's better to be the lazy cat fisherman, just throw your jugs out, sit and wait, watch them move. When the time's right, they'll be moving, and you can go out and you can pick them up. It beats standing at the bank, casting your line 1,000 times, trying to go for as many fish as you can catch at once. You got other things you can be doing. You can set those jugs out there in the morning, come pick them up in the afternoon, and you're good to go. Now, maybe that's not the most perfect metaphor in the world to kind of describe that, but it's the one that came to mind. But you'll notice in my box there's a few other things. These were researched to an extent, but they were a need. I needed to fill in the exercises that I was missing. And so that's where the value really kind of changed. I ended up going cheaper, getting something that will get me through, knowing that there's a certain amount of times that I'm going to be able to use any of these. They're not going to be warrantyable. I'm not going to get them back once they break. But that's okay. Because every single time I undo a fastener and they don't break, that's basically profit. That's good enough. I'm going to use them for the entirety of their service life until they start breaking on me and go from there. You'll notice I've got a lot of cheap stuff. It tends to be because my value is value. I'm not trying to get the best of anything. I'm trying to get the best bang for the buck almost every time. Maybe it's just something about growing up in the Midwest, but we're always hunting for a bargain. But sometimes you get something and it's more of a need, and it's something that you need quickly. A lot of my pliers aren't quite like that. I desperately needed the day that the Matco truck showed up. I quickly realized I needed some long reach needle nose, something to be able to get into places and get stuff that my big old 2X, 3X hands can't fit in. I kind of screwed myself. I'm a 6'6", 280-pound small engine mechanic with 3X glove-sized hands. I got to find creative ways to be able to manipulate things because I'm not fitting my fingers in a lot of these places. Luckily, they had this set on sale in the Matco truck. I think I ended up spending like $80 or less on all of these. It was cheaper than Channel Lock. Are they the nicest? No, these are the cheap overseas made Matco ones. I'm sure I could have gotten something cheaper if I'd been online and willing to wait a week for shipping, because that's about how long anything takes to get here when you live out in the boonies. But they were there. I needed them. They weren't a bad deal. I made that value decision and went with it. I haven't looked back. I've enjoyed them quite a bit. Let's see if there's any others. Oh, I have Matco Test Light. This one still looks bright and shiny because I got it right near the end of that time, and let's face it, there's only so many things you can test light in small engines. This thing isn't getting used every single day. Why? Well, because I broke my, $3 Pittsburgh one and needed another one. Truck was there. I got it. Saved me an 1.5-hour trip to Harbor Freight. That's the other thing. I live an 1.5 hours away from the absolute closest Harbor Freight. So when I go, I'm making it worth the gas to get there. I only go if there's the right sale or if I really needed to get something warrantied. Trying to think, there's a few others in here that I wouldn't necessarily call the most well thought out purchases. I think we've all had them. But, oh yeah, there is a third kind. And that's the purely just for fun, just nice. It's not a need, it's nice. For me, that was getting into these Matco locking flex heads. And I will say, they're a great ratchet. Had Icon had G2 out at the time that I was getting these, I don't know that I would have gone Matco. As much as I like the green handles, they're not worth the price difference. I probably would have gone with the Icon G2s. But I liked the Matco style of locking flex head the best. They were thinner than any of the others. And most importantly, this was kind of a milestone for me. This was after I'd been at it for a while, making do with everything else that I had. I wanted something better. So I sacrificed a little bit of logic and reason, spent a little more than I probably had to on these ratchets, and I love them, and I barely ever grab the low profile quins that come in the master sockets. Not because they're bad ratchets, honestly, they're phenomenal ratchets, but for what they are. And I don't know, there's better ways to go about things, but we live and we learn. It's not like I'm gonna just get rid of them because they weren't the most value-minded purchase I could have possibly made. I have them now, and so they're what I have, and they're what I'm going to continue to use so long as I have them. Could I trade them in? Possibly. Is it worth it? I don't necessarily think so. I still, even if I'm not at that shop anymore, I've still got my Matco guy's number. I can still call them up, get kits, do whatever I got to do for the little bit of the tool truck stuff that I do have, and kind of go from there. But same thing happened in my power tools. Now, I've got this T-Stack box. Why did I go with T-Stack instead of literally any other modular tool storage system? Because it was the right price at the right time, and it just worked out. I actually ended up getting all these boxes from a Facebook Marketplace deal for like $40. Seemed good enough to me. They all came together. I haven't looked at any of the other ones, but it's even the same thing with my power tools. I've got some DeWalt stuff. I know, I'm sure that's gonna get all of the myopic, brand loyal, I'm not gonna go there. But this box, I now more or less keep for more construction stuff. It's mostly home use, but they work just as well on other job sites. What's weird about them is that I've actually got the 12-volt DeWalt platform. Why would I do that? It's not a very big platform. It's not the most long-term solution. I will say, all the 12-volt extreme tools that I've used are phenomenal. They really are just as good in many ways, and some of them are better. Like, I've used the 20-volt oscillating multi-tool. 12-volt, smaller, lighter, fits into more places, uses a significantly smaller battery so you can get them into other places. And it's at least as strong. I don't think that the impact driver is necessarily the strongest thing on earth, and I think it is kind of funny that the drill is technically a hammer drill. I wouldn't go up over about 3/8 trying to get into masonry with it. Same with the circ saw. It's a small blade, but I'll tell you, it's pretty nice for cutting rafters. It's real nice when you've got to use a circ saw over your head, especially for any amount of time, to have this little 5.5-inch blade and go from there. Yeah, you gotta get a little creative with doing some of your angle cuts and things like that. That's not as efficient, but it fit in the battery platform, and most importantly, at the time I was buying all of these, they were dirt cheap on Amazon. Like, I think the most expensive one of these at purchase price for me was like $50 on Amazon for that circ saw. Now, granted, I got some of these used, things like that. I didn't plan on needing the warranty. It was going to be what it is. I needed to get things for the job. As long as they lasted the job, they would have paid for himself, and it would have been good. So that's why I went with 12 volt. I do have some 20 volt stuff, and I'm slowly building out my 20 volt because these 12 volts are all but discontinued now, but they work. And really what made me get into the 12 volt system at all was this right here. I'll probably make a whole video just on this at some point. That DCF 601, the 12 volt screwdriver. This is the most used power tool I own, period, as a small engine mechanic. I'm already getting tempted to get in there and doing a whole review on it. That'll be something for later. I've already yacked long enough, but between that and the 12 volt 3/8 stubby, these things are awesome. I had a guy at a Gen 1 Milwaukee high torque that was well worn, and we were tag teaming, getting some tractors assembled, and we were putting wheels on, and we were doing a bunch of them, and let's just say that torque spec didn't necessarily happen in that particular situation. It might have been a couple ugga-duggas. Well, he just had me go around, tighten all these up with this, and he was going to come back and make sure that they were sent all the way with that old Gen 1 Milwaukee high torque. Funny thing is, he couldn't get them to budge. So after the first wheel, he gave up. So this thing, really, for the size and weight, is getting you pretty far. On small engines, there's been very few things that I haven't been able to take off and put back on quickly and safely with just those two. The impact driver kind of makes a nice in-between for some stuff. But really, between those two, that's been the lion's share of what I was using. And once again, they were cheap at the time on Amazon. I'm not going to say that they're cheap anymore. They're going to be difficult to find just because they're pretty well doing away with all of it. But at the time, it was a good buy. It's just like everything else in here. I try to stick with a good buy at the right time. And we all kind of carry those artifacts with us through the rest of our careers. Heck, I'll even get you into one last one before I let you go. This is a tool purchase that I actually kind of regret. These are the Quinn shallow pass-through sockets. And I got them with the same 40% off as some other stuff, and I was like, okay, yeah, we'll see what they do. Thought, I tried using them a few times, didn't like it with just a wrench, so I went and got the actual Astro pass-through ratchet for it. And if you're gonna use this style, this is the way to go. Something that has that detent ring on the inside there that actually holds the sockets. But I never used this thing. It just was kind of an awkward in-betweener. For a while, I'd kept it in my box next to my other ones, where if I really needed something ratcheting and I didn't need it to pass through, this would work, but and be smaller than an actual socket on a ratchet. It just didn't get used. Eventually, at some point, I'll sell this or trade this in. It just doesn't fit my system. It doesn't fit how I work. And you're going to have some of those. Dear God, I'll just put it this way. Think about buying holsters. If you know, you know. Enough said. And so maybe that's the fourth kind, is the ones you regret. But I don't know, to make an omelet, you got to crack a few eggs. You got to try things. You got to try and expand your capacity, expand your system, be able to continuously do more with what you're getting. If all the tool that you're getting gets you is a way to do the exact same job, slightly easier or slightly better, think to yourself, well, is that the only job you do? Is there a lot of other jobs that you do that you're not perfectly equipped for, that you might be making do versus actually doing on a few other things? What are some jobs that you want to be able to do that you lack the tooling or you lack the equipment for? What's something that you want to get into that you haven't started yet and you want to go? Well, for me, that's easy. You pick a project, and you know how projects go. You got to get a new tool whenever you start a project. That's half the purpose of starting the project, is to be able to justify it. Well, things to consider. So I've rambled on way too long on this one. We'll see how this goes. But yeah, if you like what you see, like, subscribe, do what you got to do. See y'all in the next one.